maybe this isn't where I need to buy a gun, and either get somebody else to help you or go find a different store. Because the guy's not taking into consideration the size of your hand, your abilities, and so on and so forth, okay? Just because it's a revolver doesn't mean it's the gun for you. This gal brings in a gun like this to my class. She can barely hit the paper, okay? And when I'm talking about the piece of paper, I'm talking about literally an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I'm going to use my copy of the HB 650. If you can hit this piece of paper at 20 feet, you're going to do pretty good when it comes time to take your concealed carry class, okay? Look at where this sits on my chest. This is the kill zone, okay? You don't have to get, firearms don't have to be ridiculously expensive. Let me give you an example. This Glock right here that I field stripped, this 45, this thing over the counter is probably about a $700 firearm, okay? I've got another one. Actually, you know my little plastic one here that's calibered in the 357? I've got this one right here that is actually, it's a Sig Sauer. It's a 9mm, it's calibered in 9mm also, okay? Now, the thing that's unique about this particular manufacturer is they include on there a decocking lever. This is actually a good example, this will give you a good example of double action, single action, and to decock a firearm, okay? Note, when I run that slide back there, it actually cocks it. Okay, if I use the decocking lever, which is right here on my thumb, I can actually take that hammer and that hammer will go forward a little bit to a half cock position. Or I can go double action, okay, it goes, cocks it and fires it, or I can thumb it back like you did in cowboy days and just single action like that. So this is one firearm that, this is actually, it's got night sights on it, some other things too, but again, we're talking about a $700 firearm. Most of your concealed carry firearms, like this one, $250, and that includes an extra magazine. This semi-auto or this revolver right here is about $250, $300. Okay, so when you're thinking about buying a firearm, which one works best for you? You need to find one that fits your hand. My hands are so big. This one here, I can't hit the paper. I mean, I can because. But the average person is not going to be able to just pick up a grip that's that small and get it. Whereas this Glock right here, the grip on this thing is so big it fits my hand perfectly. That gal I was telling you about, as soon as I took that firearm away from her that had this little grip like this, and I handed her a 45. So she went from like a 380 clear up to a 45. And she was able to hold it on that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So it makes a big difference. The firearm that you purchase, the grip, how does it fit your hand? There's a whole lot more to buying a firearm than just going in there and saying, hey, I need a gun. There's a whole lot more to it. Okay, I got off on a little spiel there. Some questions. I know there's other questions out there, but I felt like going through that real quick might elaborate on some of the questions that might be in the room. Questions? Go ahead, sir.
Well, to start from ground zero, what are the requirements that you have to meet to be able to get the license? What's the time restraints? When can you purchase a pistol?
Good question. Basically, the way it stands right now, if you don't have a concealed carry permit, you have to go down to the sheriff's department, you have to fill out some paperwork, they do a background check, and they issue you basically a little permit to go down there and buy a firearm at Dick's Sporting Goods.
$90.
You know, that kind of thing. So they're going to ask you to go to the sheriff's department, do a background check, and all that kind of stuff. They're going to check you out. They're going to hand you this slip, and you can go down to the gun store and buy a firearm. Every time you buy a firearm, you have to go through that process. Okay? Now, if you get your concealed carry permit, which concealed carry permit, what does that involve? That involves taking a firearms concealed carry type class like I teach. There's people all over the state teaching these classes. So you got to go take the class. you spend in the concealed carry class, by law, it's 8 hours plus range time. Okay, so you're talking about a 9-hour day. Okay, you have to spend at least 2 to 3 hours, legally 2 hours, covering the legal aspects of concealed carry. I typically end up spending 3 to 4 hours going through the legal part, just because, to me, that's what gets you in trouble. I can take a couple of firearms apart, let you play with them and stuff like that, figure out how they break down, how to squeeze the trigger, how to load the magazine, unload, load, all that kind of stuff, very easily. It's more important to me that you know what the legal ramifications are of your actions, okay? So, that being said, you got 2 hours of legal, okay? And then, but it's 8 hours plus range time. Now, the state is also keeping track of those firearms instructors around that are not adhering to those guidelines. And so, for instance, say John Doe over here decides, you know what, I'm going to meet, I'm only going to charge $50. I'm only going to charge $50, and I think I can get this. If they do their little qualification test and bring it to me at the Kmart parking lot, and I can just visit with them a little while and give them kind of an introductory thing to firearms and stuff like that, man, I think about the money I could make. Well, the thing is, the state is paying attention to that. There's a commission up there, and their responsibility is to make sure that that all firearms instructors are adhering to these guidelines. And so if you go and take your class from one of those guys that are doing these shady tactics here, you're going to find yourself possibly losing your concealed carry permit because it's going to get revoked. Okay? Okay, so the typical price range is probably anywhere from $50 to $100. Okay? But if that instructor is not talking to you about 8 hours plus range time, he's not doing it in accordance with the law. Okay? 2 hours, which is legal. And then once you take that class, you get a certificate at the end of the class. It's got a serial number on it. You're going to take that down to your local sheriff's department where you live. I can do the class pretty much anywhere in the state, and then basically you take this certificate that I provide you down to your sheriff department where you live, the county which you live in, and they're going to do your fingerprinting, they're going to do a background check, and they're going to ask for another like $90 generally. And so to have a concealed carry permit, if you take the class and you get go through your paperwork process at the sheriff's department, you're looking at probably anywhere from $150 to $200. Then if you have to buy the firearm, you're looking at probably another $250 for the concealed carry type, and then if you want to get a bigger firearm like this, the thing to keep in mind though, we're talking about a concealed carry permit. Are you going to be able to conceal it? Okay. So how easy is it going to be for me to conceal this thing, and when I've got this one here that is a whole heck of a lot easier to conceal, So those are some things to think about. This one here costs $700. This one here costs $250. Did I answer your question?
With a smaller weapon that you have over here, you have the 9mm
Yeah.
slim, the 9mm slim.
Right.
Why the advantage of the larger grip on a 9mm 45 or 40 cal? We had talked about a man versus a woman. There's a reason for it, isn't it?
Control. Muzzle control.
Isn't it also double loads that you have?
Oh, you got single stack and double stack. That's I get you. Okay, the difference between the magazine for this little skinny little 9mm. See how skinny that magazine is? Just tiny. I mean, just one bullet wide. Whereas this 45, there's actually 2 bullets side by side. So it's called a double stack or a single stack. Now, double stack gives you more capacity. This one will hold 13 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. This one will only hold 7 rounds and 1 in the chamber. Now, hopefully, if you're really good, you won't need 13 rounds.
That's
Right?
that excessive force thing again.
That would be that excessive force thing.
Why you shoot it 13 times, because that's all my gun would hold.
However, a lot of times, even in competition with people that shoot, I mean, I was on the rifle and pistol team for military rifle and pistol team for about 15 years. And actually this Sig Sauer that you see right here with the night sights, me and it spent a lot of quality time on the range. And the first time, especially on a double action, the first time you actually take that thing and now here I'm single action. The trigger pound or the trigger weight on this is like 2.5 pounds. So it only takes 2.5 pounds for that thing to go off. But if I'm double action, it's like 8 pounds. Okay, so you got to really put some pressure on it. Okay, really put some pressure on it. Now, why is that important? Because when you're I draw. I got a bad guy over there. I draw, and I go over there and I go to fire off a round. The first round is you normally throw it right or left or something like that. And maybe even the second round you may throw because you kind of get in your rhythm. And I'm telling you, if you're in a self-defense type situation where your adrenaline pumping, you got your heart rate is bouncing. When was the last time you actually got done running a race, grabbed a firearm and tried to hit that target right over there?
Never.
Okay? I mean, it's pretty intense. One of the matches that I shot in the military, we actually had to run 1.5 miles with a full pack, all of our web gear on, the whole deal, mask and the whole thing. And then within minutes of getting past the finish line of the 1.5 mile run, we had to be on target. And so we had 4 targets. And those first few rounds with your heart rate up and your adrenaline and all that kind of stuff going on, that stress of that situation, a life-threatening situation that you're presented with, is going to induce that kind of stress into your body. Your breathing is going to be totally out of control. Your heart rate your heart's going to be pounding. The adrenaline is just going to be, you're going to be wigging out, okay? Because your life is in danger. And you're going to pull this thing out and you're going to hit him with the first round. It's not happening. In fact, the statistics in law enforcement, okay, indicate that 60% of their rounds fired in in this case, they're shooting a bad guy or they're shooting at a bad guy, 60% of their rounds are misses. On stressful situations like that, you will miss. So, 7 rounds may seem like 6 rounds too many. But, what if there's more than one guy? What if there's 3 guys? And they're moving. They're not standing still for you. They're not a paper target. That's right. They're not a paper target standing over there, and they aren't going to stand still for you with a gun pointed at them. I'm telling you. They're going to be moving.
They're going to be pulling their gun and shooting back.
That's right. So there's just some things to think about if you're looking at a self-defense type situation. As far as home defense goes, people will ask, well, what's the best firearm for home defense? Most people will typically say a shotgun. You normally want to get a shorter barrel. You can't go too short because then you start violating federal law, but you want to get typically a fairly short-barreled shotgun. As far as sights goes, it'd be really cool to have a laser sight. Laser sights are good, right? Because they project a laser beam over to the person's chest, and it's very intimidating to have a laser beam, a dot. I mean, they show it on TV all the time. Dude's got a dot on his chest, or maybe it's up here on his head. It's going to be very intimidating, but it's dark in your home. I mean, it's pitch black at night, right? It's dark in your home, and you're standing back here. Maybe you're using a wall for some additional cover, concealment, and you peek out around the corner with your little firearm that's got a cool laser sight on it.
Gives him something to shoot at.
Guess what? He knows exactly where that laser beam is coming from. So you've just given away the element of surprise. In other words, it's dark in the house. He may not be able to see you. But if you've got a laser sight, he knows exactly where you're standing. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going, when you're thinking along those lines. Night sights are really cool, but actually, you know, and this is something I had to cope with when I first was thinking about this too. It's like, do I need night sights on this neat little $250 firearm that, you know, if law enforcement confiscate it because I used it in a shooting kind of situation, I'm only out $250, right? If I put night sights on it, yeah, that'll help me be able to shoot at night, but if the bad guy's right there, you're going to point and shoot. Especially if he's running at you, you're going to point and you're going to shoot. And he's right there. And by the time you come up to a shooting position, he is going to be right here coming at you. If he's crazy enough to come at a loaded firearm, he's going to be right there because he is strung out. How many of you have ever talked to a paramedic or a law enforcement officer where they actually had to take down somebody that was on some kind of drug?
Yep.
I've got a brother in Illinois, okay, who's a paramedic. And he told me one time he was in this environment where this dude was passed out. There was needles all over the floor. This dude was totally just laid out on the floor. My brother is over one arm. His partner on the ambulance is on the other arm. And they were getting ready to shove a needle in this guy's arm to try to see if they could get him back. Okay, because he, for whatever reason, had blacked out or whatever. He said, Jeff, I was sitting there 1 minute getting ready to shove a needle in his arm to pump some IV or whatever into this guy. And he said, the next minute I know I'm slammed clear up against the opposite wall. The guy was so strong, and he had a gash in his head up here. He was bleeding all over the floor. But this guy was so strung out on drugs, he had this superhuman strength kind of thing going on. And basically both the two paramedics ended up on the opposite wall from where this guy just picked him up and threw him across the room. Now, it may have only been a 10-foot room, but when was the last time you was able to pick up two guys, 250, 200-pound guys, throw them across 10 feet of room? Drugs are a big problem, and that's typically where you're going to have most of your situations from bad guys. Other questions? I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm thinking I need to ask more questions here.
I don't want to cut off anybody else's question, but we haven't met, Jeff. I appreciate very much your presentation. My name is Buck Newton, and I'm chairman of the Judiciary 2 Committee in the Senate. And,
Okay.
650 is my bill.
Oh, that's
I didn't. It's a House bill,
Right.
But they passed it, and then we fixed it in the Senate in my committee, and I ran it in the Senate, and that's why you didn't hear about it in the news, because we did it right, and, and then we sent it back to them, and they did a concurrence vote. And the Castle Doctrine language was, we passed that 4 times in the Senate this last session, and that was the last time we passed it.
Yeah.
But the Castle Doctrine was my amending it to the home, outside the home, to a car or to your workplace.
Oh, yeah.
That was my amendment, and I appreciate very much your presentation. I mean, as a lawyer, I thought you did an excellent job of I mean, you know, lawyers are going to say it a little differently, but
Right.
I thought you were, for the crowd's benefit, I thought you were right on target. I mean,
Okay.
I think you got a good presentation, and you are describing it in a way that you're not talking to lawyers here. You're talking about everyday folk who need to understand what it is in the real world. And this is the first opportunity I've had to hear someone like you basically share with the public how you think these changes work, because that's important to me. You know, Joel and some others in the room know, before I was elected, I represented a guy over in Rocky Mount who he and his wife ran a vegetable stand, and they were being robbed, and he shot and killed the robber, and he got charged with first-degree murder and tried and ended up being convicted of voluntary manslaughter. And I had to take the case on appeal to the Supreme Court, and where fortunately we got it straightened out.
Yeah.
But that experience, I mean, I've always been as an adult, I've always been a gun owner. I'm a hunter. I'm all for the Second Amendment. I firmly believe in it.
Right.
But that experience pretty much crystallized for me how I think difficult it is to match everyday experiences that people may encounter in a self-defense situation
Right.
with the law. And the problem in that case that we had is they didn't find a weapon on the robber.
Right.
But there was no question that my client, what he believed, and I mean his wife and the robber were struggling, and without
Right.
going into the case, it was a jury question as to whether or not it was a self-defense. The reason why we went to the Supreme Court was because the judge wouldn't let us argue self-defense. So one point I'd like to make to everybody is it matters who you elect, not just to the presidency and to Congress and to your state senate or your state house, but it also matters who your judges are